안녕 하세요. So it's a really great honor for me to be here and also to talk to you about the internet addiction problem in Brazil. I'll try to present some features of the Brazilian reality in relation to this growing and complex phenomenon, and also to share with you how we've been thinking about it in Brazil. So Brazil is a really big country. It has over 20, yeah, 20, 200 million inhabitants. Sorry, 200 million inhabitants, and it's marked by a huge economic and social inequalities. And what's really important here, we game a lot. Brazil now is the largest gaming consumer market in Latin America, and we also love social networking sites. The Brazilian children begin to use social networking sites significantly earlier than children from other countries, and what is important here, with parental consent. So, part of this access is associated with the mobile expansion, of the incredible expansion of the mobile market. And another important factor here is that piracy, software piracy, is really widespread in Brazil, allowing kids from any age to have access to the latest games for less than $2 or perhaps $3. And one of the important features here, mainly if you want to compare it to substance abuse, that kids have their first experience with these fascinating technologies at a very early age, and they do it usually in a daily basis and at home. And perhaps that's one of the reasons, one of the factors why parents, teachers, and health professionals worry so much about the risks associated with the use, excessive or not, of these technologies. So, in Brazil, we really need more public debates and campaigns, definitely media literacy in schools, and it's obviously that we need much more research because we don't have the slightest idea of how frequent this problem is in our population. Another factor is that people's information on these subjects rely mainly on magazines and newspapers, and usually they have such an alarmist way of relating to it. But just blaming the new technologies is certainly not going to it's not the way for us to understand what's going on with the kids, the teens, and also the adults who come to us with tech-related problems. Sometimes we have to take care that we're just seeing an old phenomenon just with a new face and not necessarily a new phenomenon. And in other cases, I guess we're seeing a generational conflict where adults want to decide and control how young people from the following generations should behave, and I think it's completely impossible, but we want to. And okay, we have to deal with the fact that our society has changed. We live now in an era characterized by extreme individualism, hedonism, with focus totally on the present time, and a very poor tolerance to suffering and other negative feelings. And the speed this phenomenon, these technologies evolve, really imposes some difficulties to some more rigorous methodological research. And we don't have the slightest idea of what's going to happen next with the games, for example, next year or in the next 5 years. But in clinical practice, yes, we see some patients who develop a really intense relationship with some form of technology, with great investment of time, energy, of attention. And this relationships ends up being one of their main focus, perhaps the main focus of interest, and leaving less assisted other areas of life. These are at least some of the different game types existing, and I think it's really important when we evaluate these patients to try to really take into account this game's complexity and try to understand the most of we can about the chosen game, why do people play that game, and perhaps even to make it more complicated, how they play it, because it may be important. And this same reasoning works the same, I guess, for social networking sites also. And while we still debate, we still try to find out which best criteria define this new and complex disorder, perhaps to focus on impairment, maybe a scientifically humble way to differentiate adequately between a very interesting leisure activity that's each year more common from an excessive and problematic behavior. In most cases, as we already heard here today, of the internet addiction, we have other associated medical and psychiatric disorders and depressive disorders, anxiety disorders, and attention deficit hyperactivity disorders are among the most frequent ones. And it's really important to find out which disorder came first to try to see if they have a cause-effect relationship. And since it's really, really common that the heavy use of technology ends up being like a self-treatment strategy for anything that's not working really well in the person's life. So at the end, we have a number of different factors we should take into account, such as personality factors, psychiatric comorbidities, the life cycles moment of the patient, family values, and also parenting styles, the type of internet addiction. It's really important not to take it as a whole and differentiate what people really do in the internet, like gaming, social networking, or cybersex, for example. Sometimes we have subtypes of these functions, and sometimes even subtypes of it, so it's really complicated. And obviously, we must try to know the most of we can, the rewarding characteristics of these applications. I think we should think about it in a way that could embrace all this complexity instead of just trying to oversimplify it to what we understand. And backing a little to getting back to Brazil's situation, I think Brazil has one of the highest rates of urban violence. Sometimes it's even compared to other countries that are in war, actually. So in some situations, it's maybe even prudent to keep children at home, allowing them to play video games or exploring social networking sites all day while the adults are away working, trying to make ends meet. So, kamsahamnida.